we are switching to the topic of budget idiocy. No, I'm not done with chiding Treasurer Jim Chalmers. While we can all agree that wasting $500 million on COVID vaccine boosters is an insult to the Australian taxpayer, the real grand theft Albo is hidden under the vague description of green. It is impossible to determine how much money the government wastes on pseudo-environmentalism because it is not grouped, summarised or organised in a manner that can be audited. The wastage comes in the form of taxes, grants, investments, bonuses, promises, funds and secret handshakes. And while Labor goes on about groundbreaking carbon sinks, the only thing that we are bearing as a country is our prosperity. We are laying it to rest under the foundations of the net zero dystopia. As Alan Moran writes in the Spectator Australia, net zero is cannibalising our prosperity. Alan joins me now. Alan, welcome to the show.
Hi, Alexandra. Good to be here.
Look, there has been a distinct apathy toward this budget. Even the flattering headlines about the dodgy $300 energy bill handout have worn off. I mean, have Australians given up on the political class and transformed into a crowd of lemmings trudging toward the cliff? Because I'm not seeing much interest or resistance.
Yeah, well, there isn't, and I think part of it is just the logistics of it. They dripped all the policies out before the budgetary speech, so there's no real surprises in there. And indeed, the policies basically are all about, aren't we good? We're terrific. We are doing this for you, the people. We're giving you this. As you mentioned, the $300. We're giving you a whole lot of other things. And this is us, the government, all seeing and all offering things that they don't have in the first place. I mean, the centerpiece to the budget, and the budget is very much geared towards moving Australia into this new nirvana of green energy, which is always disappearing along the horizon, has been since the last 20 years. It's moving us along there. A centerpiece is $22.7 billion. They say they're going to spend in that. Much of that has already been pre-announced, but it's really only a subset of the colossal amounts of money, which, as you mentioned in your intro, the government actually never adds up and tells us what this money is. It's very difficult to do. I've done it on a number of occasions, but basically the answer is it's like $15.6 billion per year, every year, out of our pockets into promoting renewables and other forms of green energy and into killing coal.
And that's before, Alan, you get to the... That's before you get to the idea of having to add up all these other incidental green things that are in the private industry, like a green thing here, a green thing there, and then the banks are calculating your carbon credits for us, and they're going to pass that cost on to you somehow. There are so many green costs you wouldn't have a clue. But it doesn't seem to matter how we vote, we still end up with net zero. I mean, Morrison, the Liberals, laid much of the groundwork for Albanese's green dystopia. There's no point pretending it's any different. When it comes to voters finding a difference between the Labor Party and the Liberal Party, is there a genuine difference, Alan, or is it only the illusion of difference?
Well, I mean, it's more than an illusion, but it's not massive. Basically, they're both into net zero. One is into net zero by, well, I thought 2035 or whatever. The other is 2050. They're both sort of looking at different strategies. The Liberal Party is trying to product differentiate itself by choosing the uranium or nuclear approach to get to net zero. Doesn't really know how it's going to do it. It's getting assailed from all sides who are saying that this is even more expensive than renewable energy, which is not true, but nonetheless it is expensive. So yes, they're both focused on net zero for the time being. There are MPs like Matt Canavan and Senator Antic and maybe a dozen others who basically say, no, this won't work. We can't go down this route. Maybe things will improve, and maybe we will find ways of eliminating coal and getting renewables cheaply in the future. But Australia isn't going to discover these methods. We're going to be using part of an international R&D to discover any new energy sources. Meanwhile, we're paying this $15-point-something billion plus, as you say, the banks themselves and the private sector being sucked in. Indeed, when they talk about the $15 billion, they say this is a partnership. In other words, we're spending $15 billion of your money, but we're trying to bring in additional funds, much more than twice as much as that, to actually from the private sector, which is cannibalizing other forms of investment.
Well,
And there we get it.
Let's talk about this, because this budget isn't only promising to do more of the same when it comes to wasting money. It is also undertaking another new mistake from Labor, which is taking money out of the Future Made in Australia project. This new idea that Labor has, they're somehow going to build an Australian manufacturing industry somehow with expensive power. Alan, how much is this going to cost us, and has it got any merit, or is this the government meddling in things it doesn't understand to fix a very bad headline? And that headline is that manufacturing in Australia is dead and it was finished off by green energy.
Exactly. There is no merit in it. There is no possibility that they will build this future made in Australia. If they did, it would be a future which would be quite dystopian. It would be a terrible future. Basically, we've already come down the pike and we've actually got doubled the electricity prices. Some of that isn't reflected in our bills because basically the government, there's some subsidies and they're reflected elsewhere. But the wholesale price for electricity was once $50 per megawatt hour. It is now $100 per megawatt hour, and it can only go further up. And all that is being created by the government assaulting coal, essentially. 65% of our electricity is still coal, and they're trying to close down all of the coal generators and replace them by renewables, which is more than twice the cost. So that we end up by twice the cost. All our basic industries are based on mining and agriculture and implementing manufacturing on the basis of those. They require cheap energy. We don't have the cheap energy anymore, and so one by one, our manufacturing facilities, which were once the cream of our industry, the aluminium smelters and other sorts of smelters, are having to close, or they're being subsidized, ironically, by the government, which is actually subsidizing renewables to kill coal, then has to subsidize coal to allow that to survive and to keep on supplying a constant range of electricity products to the various smelters and other firms that are using them. So it's just a crazy idea. The government has basically taken over in ways that we'd never dreamt of before, taken over the way the industry in Australia progresses, and it's done so by driving it downhill and by driving the costs up.
Well, Chalmers needs to remember that cheap energy is like water for the ecosystem that is our economy and our manufacturing industry. If you don't have cheap energy, then you do not have an economy and you do not have a civilization. You certainly don't have a manufacturing industry. But I noticed that you mentioned Chalmers hoping, or maybe we should say praying, that his budget unlocks private investment in green hydrogen, critical minerals, green metals, low carbon fuels and clean energy manufacturing. Now, every dollar of private money spent is a public dollar saved. In theory, at least, so far so good. But is this true private investment, or is this private investment after the government gives away huge public grants? Because I don't see any energy giants or mining giants tossing their money onto the bonfire along with our tax dollars.
Well, they're certainly not tossing along on any bonfire unless it's subsidized by our tax dollars. There is no money being allocated into these industries unless they are subsidized by tax dollars. And here is the rub, basically. When the private sector throws money into subsidized industries like that, it is taking the money which would otherwise go into more productive enterprises. I mean, people are scratching their head thinking, why is it that our productivity, the Productivity Commission itself, why is it our productivity is down? It's actually falling, been falling the last couple of years. It's almost unprecedented that would happen at a time of relative prosperity and high unemployment. But why is our productivity falling? Well, the much of the investment, which would otherwise go to enhance living standards, is actually going there to destroy living standards. It's actually there to get rid of cheap energy and replace it by dear and highly irregular energy. That's a key reason why essentially our living standards are falling.
Well, I don't contest that at all. But creating an energy grid based upon ideology instead of practicality is immensely egotistical, and frankly it displays a level of delusion comparable to Napoleon sitting in Moscow as it burned around him with the streets full of criminals and stray dogs. I mean, did Napoleon make it to Moscow? Sure. Was the endeavour worthwhile? I mean, ask yourself the next time you watch a beach slowly vanish under the shade of wind turbines if this ideological thing is worth it. I mean, you'd be standing there with little seagull feathers coming down around you like snow. It's an absolute disaster what's happening to our environment. I mean, the material point is the green energy transition worth it for the taxpayer, Alan?
Well, it's not worth it because it's the transition. Even if we get there, it's going to be double the prices, and it's going to destroy the electricity industry. It's not like, oh, we spent this and it was a bit of a pity. It wasn't as profitable as we thought it would be. No, this is worse than that because basically we spent this money not on something that was marginally profitable, but something that was unprofitable. And in spending it, it destroyed things that were profitable or that were good. The coal mines, which have been, the coal generators, which are having to shut down progressively, were provided constant energy at a cheap price, at $50 or whatever it is per megawatt hour. They've been forced to actually change the way they operate because of the subsidized wind and solar, which comes in when it comes in, the coal generators have to close down, and then they open again, close down. One way or another, this enhances their costs, makes them unprofitable. Their shareholders say, when something needs replacing, do we really need to do that? And then they try and close the power station. Sometimes governments come along, as they have done both in Victoria, ironically, which is the worst of all the governments, and in New South Wales, to try to ask or force or bribe the coal generators to stay open a few more years, hoping that within a few years we will have all the transmission and all the renewable energy we can adequately replace them. It won't happen. It won't happen. And in trying to do it, we are actually destroying our economy.
Well, I can't be alone, Alan, I don't care about all the fine detail about this green energy transition. For me, I don't want to see Australia's beaches, the waterways, our oceans, our rainforests, our farmland. I don't want to see it covered in solar panels or giant-sized, skyscraper-sized spinning machetes or suffocated under all these new transmission lines. That is not the green utopia that Australians were promised when they voted for this new environmentalism. It is environmental butchery, and no matter what price tag they put on it, they cannot account for the damage they are doing to this amazing and beautiful country. Alan, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today here. Thank you for joining us on Spectator TV.
Fantastic. Thanks for that.